So, hello, Kerry. Welcome to my podcast, One for the Road. I'm so grateful you've agreed to join me today. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. It's lovely to see your face.
And yours. And I've just seen your home and it looks fantastic. It looks really lovely.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. So, I wanted to get you on today um, because we've had a few children of alcoholics on, Sarah Drage, John Taylor, Amy Dixon. But we've known each other for a while, and I came to see you in Brighton where you worked alongside Oasis, the charity, and you did an exhibition in Brighton. And when I was on the train, you suggested that maybe I could do a talk. And do you know what? It was absolutely brilliant to come to that event. And when I stood up there and talked, I felt like a fish out of water because I was the alcoholic, you know. But after the talk, I realized actually the importance of sharing my story from the other side.
Mm.
And at the end, people came up to me and were really like engaging with me and welcoming. And, and I realized that there is a place for me in this community to talk. And I'm really grateful to you as well for giving me that space to talk that day. Um, but what I wanted to start with is to, if you don't mind, is to go back at the beginning of your story when you was growing up.
Mm.
Because I saw that reel you did with your mum and it literally broke me. And I think that's when we started chatting. So are you okay to start from the beginning?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, what is the beginning? Let me think. Okay, so my mum sounds like she was really confident, really popular, really beautiful lady who, uh, I don't know, growing up just sounds like she had an amazing childhood. It sounds like, I don't know for definite. Teenage years did really well. She was the youngest woman ever to drive a HGV class one. She was the first 21-year-old ever to do it. You know, she was doing really well with everything. And then when I was 4, she met a man who was violent very quickly. It was like a real quick toxic relationship where she moved in with him after a week and married him after a month. And I remember when we met him because he'd just been beaten up in a shop and we went to help him. And that was it. She was instantly drawn to him for some reason. And I remember being 4 the first time that I saw her eyes change. And I don't know how I knew, but as a 4-year-old, I knew my mum was drinking and nobody told me, but I just knew. So I always think when people say they don't know, children do know. And even if they can't make sense of it, they know there's something going on. They can feel something isn't right and they can feel a disconnect from a parent. And after that, my life was pretty much chaos. I think 4 was the last stage I was a child. After that, I became a carer, a protector, definitely keeping that family secret and doing it at all costs, you know, completely surrendering myself to make sure that my mum was okay and that my family were okay, and even, you know, trying to protect my grandparents from it. Um, so I think until the age of 9, there was a lot of violence. When we finally left my stepdad, gosh, by the time we left, things were so bad that we were locked in a 1-bed flat by him. And the day we left, he was passed out on the sofa, and I crawled down the corridor, sneaked the keys out of his pocket, and said, "Come on, mum," just grabbed her, and we just ran. Um, and that was kind of the statement was in by them. It was just me taking control and saying, "This is it." It kind of felt like life or death then.
Oh,
He wasn't messing around anymore. You know, he was losing control of us. And you know, when you hear about people in domestic violence and you think, why aren't they keeping their child safe? Why aren't they leaving? Because the alternative for my mum was he would threaten to hurt me, and she didn't want that, so she had to stay with him. And they do it very slowly, and they slowly take all your independence away and your confidence, and you don't have the strength to leave. Um, and while this was going on, I was living between my grandparents and my mum's. My granddad was amazing, so he would just follow me around the country wherever I went, and when mum started drinking, he'd swoop in and get me, and he'd take me for a while and then send me back to her. But so I'd moved. I think I've moved around 32 times now, and I'm 41.
wow.
But Yeah, but most of those were in my childhood. So when you said, "Oh, you've got a lovely home is really important to me." You
Yeah.
know, a home that I feel it's my roots, it's my safe space, because I didn't have that when I was young. You know, I'd go home and the bailiffs had been round and all my stuff had been taken, or I wouldn't have a home. You know, at times we've lived in some random places. We've lived in places like, I remember sleeping on a shop floor for ages while my stepdad was working in the shop. We've lived in bed and breakfast. We've lived in hotels. We've lived in really random places to try and, with my stepdad and all his chaotic life. Yeah, so when she left him, you'd think that's great, but actually the drinking was so strong then, the symptoms of everything she'd been through, that she was just broken by it all. And I moved back in with her when I was 11, and I stayed with her until I moved out at 19. But she was just drinking all the time, and she was so ill. So my teenage years were really hard as well, in a different way. There wasn't violence anymore. I had a new stepdad who was lovely and calm, but it was really hard as a teenager to have to carry on keeping that secret. Sorry, I've just spoken a lot there.
No, that's fine. It's really moving actually. And what were you? Did you say you were 9 when you grabbed the keys to move? I mean, the responsibility on your shoulders there as well at such a young age is immense.
Yeah, yeah. The fact that we were being, I mean, I look back now, I think it's crazy when you look at a 9-year-old to think we were locked in. Um, we weren't allowed to leave this flat by then. It was dangerous, I think, and I knew how dangerous it was, so I had to just take the chance. Because if he'd woken up, gosh, I don't know what would have happened. But we did get away, and I still remember just running down the road to the bus stop and that feeling of freedom. But the problem is with alcohol, the freedom isn't there when you leave the relationship. You know, you can't just take away the problem, can you? You can't, because the addiction's still there. Mum
Yeah,
couldn't stop drinking then because she was so traumatized from it all.
yeah. And how bad was her drinking?
Um, well, so how old would she have been? I think she started drinking when she was 32, because I was 4, maybe 30. It was bottles of cider, things like that, big bottles of Strongbow, and it was always hidden. So you wouldn't actually know it was happening apart from, from seeing the symptoms of it. You didn't see her drink that often. She drank in the pub. She could really drink in the pub, but not to extreme any more than other people. But it was just, yeah, a lot of hidden. So I would guess it was like a big bottle of Strongbow a day or something like that. I think there were stronger drinks. She drank wine as well, but I didn't really know exactly how much was being drunk because I couldn't see it. I never knew.
Mm,
But I would often find bottles and try and tip them away, which, as a child, even until 4 years ago, I didn't know that was a bad thing. I thought it was a good idea to tip it away because I thought, I've got a day of her being sober. And if I stop her drinking, well, that's the answer. But actually, she'd always find another way of drinking, but she'd be a lot angrier. So
yeah,
it's the worst thing to do, but that's all I knew. And, I don't regret it because I was doing the best I could with what I had at the time.
yeah. I always remember Sarah Drake saying in the podcast that we did about pouring her dad's booze away and stopping him seeing the kids, and you learn in hindsight, don't you? Especially with the taking the drink away, is actually it could be dangerous as well if she was dependent on it.
Yeah, yeah, it was really bad when my mum stopped drinking. So we'd have like, you get the irritation and then you'd see her sort of getting sweats and stuff. But after a few days, she'd be hallucinating. And oh my God, it was so scary to live with because I didn't know what was going on. And the first time it happened, I think I was 12. And yeah, she was just absolutely doing really bizarre things. I had my friends round. Oh, it was awful. That's some of the most traumatizing memories are from when mum stopped drinking, and trying to stay with her through that and support her through it. And the only way to do that was to agree with her, with everything that she was saying was happening. And eventually she'd calm down and come out of it. So I can see why she wouldn't stop drinking because
Yeah.
it's horrendous. You hear about withdrawals from things like heroin, but withdrawals from alcohol when you're physically addicted are severe.
Mm. And for you, you were micromanaging so many things from an early age, wasn't you? And how did
Yeah.
that knock on to you then? Did you have a relationship with alcohol at an early age, or did you avoid it?
Um, So I did hate alcohol for me because I didn't see myself as the same as my mum. So I didn't avoid it. I think I first drank when I was 14, and I started, and that was it. And I'd drink a bottle of vodka before I even went out. You know, I really wanted to go out and blow out. So I would just get as hammered as I possibly could. And at first, mum wasn't supportive of it. Obviously, I was very young. She would say, don't drink when you go out. But then after a while, by the time I got to about 16, she loved it because it was another excuse to drink. So she'd actually get me the vodka and she'd sit with me and my friends. And it would feel lovely at the time. She'd be like, oh, yeah, your mum's really cool. She gets this
Yeah.
drink. But it was because she wanted to drink. And it was the only way she could connect with me. It was like, well, I'll have a drink with you then. So I got myself in some terrible states, really, you know, toxic relationships, really low self-worth. It's really sad looking back on what state I was in my teens. But when she died, when I was 21, I think I had a couple of nights out where I really embarrassed myself, and I decided to stop drinking for a year. And I've never been the same since. So all I'll have now is one or two drinks when I go out, and everyone laughs at me and calls me a lightweight. But that's all I need now. I can't seem to get to the stage where I lose control. I don't let myself now.
Yeah. It's amazing how some people can do that, because I know millions that can't, but you've got a lot of history there, right? Before your mum died, I mean, watching this reel that when this is released, I try and share that if it's still on your page. But it was so powerful to see how your mum changed in the images, and that's what got me, because it started off with her like beautiful, young, fresh, to what she turned into. And when I look at the before and after pictures of me, it's like, oh my God, I was probably on the verge of death. You know, like all the medication I was on and the weight gain and the drinking daily, the bad food choices, the mental health that it created for me, you know, like I don't know how I survived, but when leading up to that, could you really see she was in trouble before she died? Or was it a slow burner for you?
Well, as far back as I can remember, she didn't have a good relationship with food, and she would admit she maybe had anorexia. So she'd cook me dinner or make me something, but she wouldn't eat herself. And she got very, very thin. And I remember her being very wobbly legged. You know, she was like Bambi. And it wasn't
Mm,
always when she drank, she was just very wobbly. Um, and then I remember, and this is a bit a bit graphic, but she'd chew food up and actually spit it out. So she would have something like some sort of meat, but she couldn't swallow anymore. And I remember the first time I saw her do that, and I thought, oh, what's she doing? And she said, oh, that's a bit chewy. And then eventually she went on to more like liquid. So she'd buy herself Complan or 40 Sip. They're like those milkshake drinks. And that's all she was having towards the end. But I thought she had anorexia. But looking back now, is that quite hand in hand with people who drink? I've heard it can be that you don't eat anymore sometimes when it's quite extreme. And so she had this really skinny legs, but then she had this huge tummy that was yellow.
mm,
You know, she was full of fluid. I remember it literally seeping out of her skin, the fluid, and her ankles. If she wore socks, they were like, you know, like peg dolls. They go in where the elastic was. She went into hospital. Gosh, it was a few months before she died, and they actually there's a funny story here, which is not that funny, but I was at work and I suddenly started having a panic attack, and I thought, gosh, where's this coming from? And I couldn't breathe, and my chest was tight. And my boss sat me down, and eventually I came out of it. She was in hospital at the time, and I rang Grandad. I said, oh, Grandad, it's all getting too much. I've had a panic attack. He said, your mum's just collapsed. And we'd done it exactly at the same time. And she'd had too much fluid drained off her stomach, like litres of it. And
yeah.
she collapsed because of it. And at the very same time, I'd collapsed. And it was just really interesting to see that bond we had. And that's how it always felt with her. You know, every time she was in pain, I was in pain. It was like that mother bond, that mother daughter bond. We were just always so connected. So it didn't matter when I moved out and I saw her less. You know, you say you put all these boundaries in place, but when your parents drinking, you take yourself away from it. It's worse. It was for me, because now I didn't know what she was doing. I didn't know if she was safe, if she was having a breakdown. I couldn't control anything anymore. And it felt okay when I could control it, because I kept her alive. A number of times she would have died if I hadn't been there, to pull her out of rivers and all sorts of things. So yeah, it's really hard when you leave them.
How do you deal with that now? Like, have you had intensive therapy, or how do you cope with that?
Oh, I've had so much, and I continue to. So I had sort of person-centered therapy for years, which was great when I was going through it. But I realised a couple of years ago, I think Sophie Kay was speaking with Nacoa, and she talked about complex PTSD, and I thought, oh God, yeah, that's what I've got. Because very often when I'm in the here and now, something will happen and it will take me right back there to
Mm.
something I've been through with her. So I had EMDR therapy, which really looks at sort of inner child work, and it was, it's life changing for me, because how harsh I am with myself as an adult now. To look at little me and really see that I shouldn't have gone through all that has been really helpful now. In when I do get anxious and I do worry about things, to be kind to myself and say, look, this makes sense based on what you've been through, but you are safe now and everything is okay. But instead of pushing it down and feeling ashamed of my anxiety, to be able to really sit with it.
It's really fascinating, isn't it, looking at the inner child stuff? Because I did
Oh.
a course with Josh Conley and his breath work and that, and it was a individual one. He gifted it to me to help me out with what I was going through, right? And I always remember him saying to me, "So what does little Dave look like to you? What do you want to say to little Dave?" But the fact he said little Dave made me burst out crying, because I was such a fragile boy, like insecure, no confidence, low self-esteem and that. And it brought me, like what you say about coming from now back to that moment. I was standing right in front of the 14-year-old me then. And it was the weirdest thing. It brought up all
Yeah.
this emotion in me that I didn't know what to do with at the time.
Yeah.
It's so
Yeah.
powerful.
Yeah, it's really hard because you don't usually connect on that level. You can remember yourself as a child, but you're looking at it through your eyes now. But when
Mm.
you can actually picture the little you, because that's what EMDR does, you see it from you now, and you are watching little you, and it's, gosh, heartbreaking to see what you did have to endure, and how you felt, and when you couldn't speak to anyone. But it really has helped me. I'm definitely still traumatized, and I feel it every day still in some ways. But I think I'm doing a lot better because of getting support whenever I need it, and really acknowledging when I am struggling, and not just going, no, I've got to be strong, I've got to carry on, I need to help everyone else. That actually it's okay to get help for yourself as well when you need it.
A lot of children of alcoholics, we have this conversation together, like when they say, was I not enough? And I've talked about that myself, of my own son when I was drinking, and he was definitely enough. It was more about me. But do you still go through those feelings of not being enough, or have you managed to work through them?
I think there's it's just so different all the time. I could tell you practically now, I know it wasn't to do with me. I know it was to do with addiction, and my mum had her own demons. But deep down, I still feel unlovable because of it. And at times when I'm struggling, if I come into conflict with someone, or if I'm tired, ill, having a rough time, I feel unlovable. And it's because of that. My mother wound is deep, and I think I'll always be pretty heartbroken that I couldn't save her and that nothing could. Yeah, it's still there, definitely. I don't know, I just don't think it can ever go away completely, and how it's hard to make sense of completely. Yeah.
It's that rescuer role we were talking about earlier, isn't it? Before this, like that's your role now, isn't it? Of being a rescuer. And is it tap into the fact you couldn't rescue your mum that makes you feel like you failed, maybe?
Yeah, I think it is just what you become in life. I think when you do it from such a young age, it's that kind of people pleasing, that if I am good enough, if I try harder, everyone will be okay. But I'm responsible for everyone else's happiness, so I've got to keep that up. when actually I'm not, and everyone else doesn't have to be happy. You know, I'm not responsible for any of that, but it's easy for that to kind of, yeah, for that to happen. And I just think it is a big part of me, but I really try and think about my own needs as well now. And that actually, you know, if people are going through problems in life, you shouldn't rescue them because they can do that themselves. You should be there to support people, but not to be like, right, I know what you need now.
Yeah,
I'm going to
yeah.
do all this for you. Yeah, I've really changed that because in being a rescuer, in that triangle, the drama triangle, you make another person a victim.
Mm.
And, you know, with my friends and family and stuff, I wouldn't do that now. If people want my support, I'll give it them, but I'm really conscious now to not be that rescuer.
Yeah, the drama triangle is a whole new conversation.
Yeah.
Rescuer, victim, persecutor, and we all go in that constantly all day. And I've really learned a lot of how not to do that, to
Mm.
try and stay on the outside. And a little thing that I quite often talk about are WhatsApp group chats that I've seen people get involved in a conversation that's actually got nothing to do with them. And it's like, well, don't stay in it then, come out.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
silly little things in life that we do that we get involved with
Yeah.
when we don't have to. And it's, you know, about supporting someone is sometimes just listening. You don't have to fix, you can
Yeah.
just listen, and that's enough, and help them make their own mind up, you know. Um,
Yeah.
what led you to Nacoa? When did you find them?
So I was scrolling Facebook one day, oh gosh, what year was it? Probably about 2013. And I saw a competition for Recovery Street Film Festival. And it was just about your recovery. And I thought, well, I'm not recovering from addiction, but I'm recovering from my mum's addiction. So I decided to enter. And somehow I won it. And I wanted to do something with the film. I didn't show it to anyone. I just went to the went to the film screening, sat at the back. They brought me my award over. I couldn't even stand up. I was so anxious. And I thought, what can I do? So I Googled children of alcoholics, found Nacoa, and just said, would you like to use my film? And then that was it. Once you join Nacoa, you never leave.
Yeah, I know.
And yeah, and just the thought that, you know, there could have been someone confidential at the end of the phone because I would never have spoken out. And it doesn't matter who tells me that schools are different now. I would have been in danger to speak out. So my life would have been in danger. I couldn't have gone and spoken to anyone. So it's not always safe for children to speak out, but I could have rung a confidential helpline where I knew that they wouldn't know my name, where I lived, or anything. And they could have helped keep me safe in my own way. They could have helped give me strategies to keep safe and to make choices and to look at things from different angles, not just through a child's eyes, you know, to see were there any ways, any adults I could speak to in a safe way. So gosh, yeah, I think it was founded when I was young, but obviously I didn't know about it. And just it's amazing the work that they do.
It's so incredible to have that chat line, you know, like I was talking to someone the other day, I think it was peers on there saying that, you know, young kids sometimes ring up just asking for someone to talk to about their feelings. And I did a talk with Sarah Drage at a school, and people come up to me individually as the drinker asking advice on how to deal with their parents. And there was one fella that used to lock himself in his office and drink, and she knew it. She was like 16, I think, and you could see the hurt in her eyes, you know, of
Mm,
confusion and not knowing what to do, what to say, how to support her dad, you know. And as I said to you earlier, like that's an incredible weight on your shoulders, isn't it? Like
mm,
what you went through growing up with that responsibility and confusion, and probably feelings of rejection as well, is like because your parents, well, they leave you when they drink, don't they? You know, they're not
mm,
present. And this is quite often what I talk about, is like a look in the eyes, you know, the vacant look.
mm,
And this
mm.
is where you growing up become hypersensitive. And I imagine from an early age you felt quite alone.
Yeah, yeah, alone, really different to everyone at school. I just look at, you know, at all my peers and think they got a normal life, but I hadn't. But also thinking about how others feel. Even now, I'll go into a room and I'll be checking. with everyone. You know, if someone gives me a slight look differently, I think, oh, what's happened there? You know, I can sense everything. And I could tell, you know, if I'll be at work and someone would be sitting away from me with their back to me, and I go over and I go, "Are you all right?" And they'll burst into tears. Like, how did you know? Because that's
Yeah.
what my brain does. But I don't know how I feel. I find that really hard.
Yeah.
If someone said, "How are you?" I'm like, I don't know. So getting to accept how I'm feeling and respond to that has been hard. I kind of work at this until I burn out. I'm not very good at kind of working out when I need to rest and things.
That's kind of avoidance as well, isn't it? I realised that after last week, I took a little mini break off the back of my Dry Jan lives, right? And I turned off social media and I turned off my phone, really, full stop. And I realised actually, God, all these thoughts that are coming through haven't been there for a long time, and it was really difficult for me to manage some of them, you know. And I realised that I've replaced one escape mechanism with another, and that's to work, you know.
Yeah.
It's another
Yes.
avoidance.
Distracting your brain. It's like eating. I'll often sit in the evenings and eat loads when I'm struggling because it's another distraction. I don't want to feel how I feel, so I'll just feel full, or I'll just binge watch something. Or it's really hard to be in your body at times when you when you're
Mm,
traumatized. It's easier to just find something else, keep busy, especially
mm.
when you're doing something good for others. Social media is a gosh, yeah, that can really give you those hits you want, those dopamine hits, but actually you again avoiding how you're feeling, aren't you?
Yeah, you are. And what it does, it doesn't allow you to have your own free time, because I get messages from all over the world, all different
Yeah.
time zones, and some messages are from people really needing help right there and then. So I have to have boundaries as well, you know. And
Mm.
there are times that I think actually it's 10 o'clock on a Friday night and you've sent me a message and there's a high chance you've been drinking. So if I answer that message, then I'm going to get wrapped into a loop there. So I don't reply to the morning. It's
Yeah.
a full-time job sometimes, social media.
Yeah. You really do need boundaries around it, don't you? Yeah.
Yeah,
And again, that rescuer role can come in. It's yeah, you can oh gosh, you could get awful messages at that time of night that you feel then
yeah.
responsible for. And yeah, I think that's great to wait till the next day sometimes.
And sometimes it makes you wonder why we rescue. And for me, I think it's the feeling of wanting to be liked. And you know, that's why I drank. So I shape shifted around so many people. And since I've stopped drinking, I've had to work on that hard with myself of, you know, you're not going to please everyone all the time. Like yourself more. I've done a lot of self-development work, and it has helped a lot actually, in that area, because I used to try and rescue everyone all the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a hard that's a really hard one for me, not being liked. And it's something that I continually work on because I think because of my upbringing, I can feel very annoying. And people always say, "Oh, you're not annoying." I'm like, "No, I'm fine with that. I talk too much sometimes. I'll talk over you. I don't know. I just do things and I think, oh, no, I shouldn't have done that." And then I think, well, that's me. And
You're
if people don't like
enthusiastic.
me, yeah, yeah, I am. I'm passionate. But if people don't like it, it's okay. You know, everybody isn't meant to like me. And
Yeah,
as long as I've got my people around me who do love me and care about me, it's okay if everybody doesn't like me. And in pleasing everyone, I'm not being authentic because I'm not being me. So
no.
people aren't experiencing the real me, they're experiencing a character. So now
Mm.
I'm really trying, even when I see people go like, "Oh, you're being annoying," I think, well, it's okay. It's fine. At least I'm being myself. And I just always felt I was too much as a child because if I wasn't just feeling to blame, I was told I was to blame. You know, if things went wrong in our house, it was like, well, it's because you've done that. You now I'm gonna told you these would fall out. Now, yeah, I'm gonna drink because of you doing that, or yeah, like my stepdad would get angry. So I always felt to blame. And I always felt I needed to change. And now I think I don't want to change anymore.
Oh, it's so difficult, isn't it? Um, and moving on to your work now, because um, there's something inside of us, right? We turn a bad experience into something that can help others. So, at what point in your life did you feel like you need to support others with similar issues in their childhood and whatever?
Well, I was a family support worker for years from when mum died, but that wasn't particularly addiction. That was just sort of family struggling. But more recently, it was when my daughter was 2 that I decided to volunteer for Oasis and to become a volunteer for Nacoa as well. And I started working in the Oasis creche because I just wanted to work with the children while the parents were in recovery. You know, I could really feel what they were going through. And I think when you've been there, you can kind of spot the signs and you can see the little child that's being really well behaved, but you know, actually they're trying to please, and you don't just see them as a child who's being well behaved, or you can see the chaoticness and them trying to make sense of it. And so I really enjoyed working in there. And then, and more recently, I've got a job as a co-facilitator for parents in recovery. It's called Mellow Parenting. And I never thought I would be able to stand up in front of a group and talk. It's just never been me. I just feel, gosh, the most great imposter syndrome, but I absolutely love it. And it's given me a new level of respect for people in recovery, and just, they're just amazing. To, you know, just every day in recovery, I just think, wow,
Yeah,
how are you doing it? How are you, you know, parents who've had their children removed,
yeah,
that have gone to rehab, that are trying every day to do everything that social workers are asking. It's just incredible. And to be that support for them. And you know, I share bits of my own experiences with them as well, of my childhood, and it's just this amazing space. So I'm loving that at the moment. That's kind of the main part of my job that I'm really enjoying.
it's really eye-opening, isn't it, when you see the different degrees of this drug, how it affects people. I trained to be a peer mentor in a day centre in Clapham. And I would go there twice a week for 10 weeks and sit in a sharing circle as well. And to hear people's real rock bottom everyday moments of getting
Mm,
out of bed without drinking is a major, major win for them, you know.
mm,
Um, People having their children taken away, people having injunctions out on them so they can't see their children because of their drinking. And every single day they get out of bed and they might walk to this day centre or get 3 buses just to get there, to feel they've got some hope in their life, you know. Um, and, you know, social media is a great and wonderful place, but these people haven't even got phones, half of them, or they've just got those like cheap ones without internet because they can't afford a tariff and stuff like that. And somehow they find the money to get one drink or something. And it really, really opens your eyes to how shit it is, isn't
mm,
it?
mm.
You know,
Yeah,
it
but all,
really
yeah,
angers me.
yeah, I think people who don't get it, you know, they haven't been there, and they probably haven't got any of the strength those people who are in recovery have. And you imagine the focus it takes to get that money together and have that drink every day. Once you take the addiction away, these people can do amazing things with their lives. They
Mm,
really can put that determination into something else. And that's why peer support is so amazing,
mm,
because that's what they want to do then. That's what happens a lot of the time, isn't it? You go from being in addiction to in recovery to then connecting with others and helping them, and it becomes your life purpose, because you think, why have I been through so much? Like me with my childhood, why did I go through it all? Well, it makes sense to me because now I can hopefully help a lot of other people, and not in the way that I want to save them, but in the way that I understand them and I can connect with them on a different level, because I get it. I get that, like, my mum spent every day probably hating drinking but couldn't stop. I understand it. I would never think, oh God, just stop, you know, just leave him. Just, it's not easy. It's a really, really hard thing to do. And yeah, I feel like I've got the empathy that I might not have had if I hadn't been through it.
do you have resentment towards your mum, or do you understand it enough that you've let that go, or do you think that's something you still need to work on?
I haven't let it go, and I don't need to work on it.
Okay, that's a great
Yeah,
answer.
yeah. So I don't know if you saw the last video I made. I did it with stop motion. It was all little figures and things, and it was all about inner child work. And it was basically saying, I'm taking away all the excuses now. I'm taking away all the reasons you drank. I simply shouldn't have been there. And it doesn't matter why mum drank or, any of that. A child should never be in that situation. And that's how I see it now. So I won't ever forgive what she put me through. But it's okay. I don't believe in forgiveness if it's not for me, not for anyone else, but for me. I don't need to forgive anyone. I feel happy to be like, this was just shit. This shouldn't have happened. But I'm okay with that, if that makes
that's
any
amazing.
sense.
Yeah, it does. That's really powerful, actually. That's
Yeah.
really,
So
really
that,
powerful. That resonates with me with a few things as well. It's like when my mum died, I kind of thought, right, it's what it is. There's sometimes you've got to call a spoon, you know.
yeah, 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 yeah. And I was a bit worried about this video because I thought it might be shameful to people drinking. But this time, I keep like I'm showing off, I'm not. But I won the Recovery Street Film Festival again this year. And it was a room full of people in recovery. And I thought, gosh, how is this going to be received? And I didn't actually enjoy winning because I felt quite shameful that I'd entered it, and I was worried about other people there. But nobody said that. Everybody said, "That's it. I need to get better for my children. It's never their responsibility. I need to do this so that they can move on with their lives, and I need to recognise how important it is for them that I get better." Yeah, so it is a bit brutal, this one, but it's what inner child work did to me. Every situation it took me back into, I just thought I shouldn't have been here. Someone should have picked me up and taken me away. And I know Grandad did, but I always ended up back there. I shouldn't have gone back there. While she was ill, I should have been kept safe. My home environment should always have been safe, and that is it with children. That's how I see it now.
Yeah, it's really powerful. I don't know whether you've connected with John Taylor. He wrote Alcohol Stole My Mum. He's been on this podcast, and when he described how he used to make sure his mum was all right when she was drunk at such an early age, and he loved her so much
Mm,
and cared for her so much, but it broke my heart the way he described how he would try and get her onto the sofa and put a blanket over her, and
mm,
like it's so much responsibility. But I suppose, like, for me, it's always hard to try and have these conversations because I was the alcoholic, and but I mean, this would be controversial for some people, I'm sure, but it turns you into someone really selfish
mm,
because, like there's that whole conversation, you have a choice. I had a choice. I did have a choice. And some people say you don't. When you're hooked in addiction, you don't have a choice. You need alcohol so you can survive. I think we've all got a choice, right? And I could have chosen to or not to drink, but I drank when I shouldn't have done, you know?
mm, mm,
There was times I wasn't when my son was young, and I thought, if anything happened and I passed out on the sofa. But there's sides of that. It's like how old was he when I decided that that was okay to drink? And
mm,
there's so many questions I asked myself in it. And at the time, this is more work I need to do on myself here. Do you know what I mean? And this is why
mm,
talking to you really helps me as well, because it's understanding from the other side. But I was incredibly selfish because excuse me, I drank when I shouldn't have done.
mm. I think it takes hold in a way that you can't help it, and you probably would like to stop, but you can't. But I have a bit of an issue with that whole thing as well, of not having a choice, because we have tiny choices even when we're struggling as adults and as parents. And even if that tiny, just to get out, get a little bit of help, or do something really small to try and help yourself. But the only person who doesn't have a choice is a child. They
Mm,
have no choice because they can't do anything else. And for me, these campaigns that say there isn't a choice, that worries me a little bit. That what does that make a child listening feel like? Well, that takes it back internally to them. Because if it's not mum's choice, if I'd heard that as a child, well, it's not her choice. Oh my God, it's my responsibility then. It's my fault. I've got to make this about me then, and I've got to look after it. That's just how I see it, and what I think I would have responded to those sort of things as a child. I really get that it changes you. And my mum was two different people. But for me, as a voice of the child of an alcoholic, I would say the choice is really just not with the child.
Mm. I hear that goosebump stuff. That and with your mum, did she overcompensate when she come out of her drinking stint, or was she? Because you said she was two different people.
Yeah. Oh God, she was just wicked when she didn't drink. She was amazing. She was just so funny, and we were like sisters. We'd
Mm.
fight, and we'd she'd always make me nice food. Like she'd buy me stuff. She'd be like, "What do you want?" And she'd get me anything I wanted. And she'd buy me presents. So when she wasn't looking after me, she'd come at Christmas with loads of presents for me, things like that. But she was always not very well. So when she wasn't drinking, she was quite irritable and stuff. But like I remember last time when I was on your live, I read that poem called "The Glimpse I Had of You," because I'm really grateful for those glimpses. You know, the times she could make it to school to pick me up, the times when I wasn't sleeping at night and she'd help me with it. There were lots of memories there that are really special and that I can pass on to my children now. Like all my silly ways and annoying ways are all from her, and I love it. And I love how silly they are because of her. So there's so much I can take from her. And I just see that completely separate now to her drinking. She wasn't the same person.
That's really sad. That makes me feel really sad because you had two versions of someone, and that the first version when you were like sisters is so amazing. So I imagine for you to see her slipping, morphing into the other person was even more heartbreaking.
It's what makes it hard now. Is, you know, if she'd been horrible, I wouldn't care that she's not here. But that's what really makes me sad now. I think I just would love her to have met my children. I'd
Mm.
love her to be here. You know, when I'm having a bad day, I'd love to ring her and just say, "Come and help me, please." But I never do that. I never ask anyone for help. I am a parent who has to be strong all the time because there isn't anyone to ask. It's really hard not having her here. And I can't think about her most of the time because it's too hard, because she was literally perfect to me in every
Yeah.
way apart
Yeah.
from the drinking. I couldn't have, you know, I used to lie there in bed and I used to think about my friends' mums and think, oh, what if you could swap her? You know, like a bit of a silly game in my imagination. I used to think I'd never swap her. And that was even when she was drinking, because she was just like me. We got each other. And that's just what makes it really rubbish now, is like, this is forever. And this year it's 20 years. And I'm like, I've lived without her for 20 years. And I only lived with her for 21. And I've got to carry on living without her forever. And I just think, oh God, yeah. I think this year's going to be a bit of a tough one because of that.
Yeah. I mean, we were chatting before this podcast, and this is quite a pivotal year for you, isn't it? It's almost like a line in the sand. I think that you're gonna move direction by not talking about it so much.
Yeah, I keep thinking about it, and to be honest, my memories are fading of her. I'm not a young girl anymore. I'm 41, and I can't speak about it as much anymore, and because I can't remember as much, and it's just every time I talk about it, to you it feels like a chat now, but every time I do any news interview or things like that, it drains the life from me for months.
Mm,
It's not an easy thing to do. To talk about her is, it feels really important. I really
mm.
want to let other people know they're not alone, but it is hard, and it doesn't get easier, to be honest, because she's still gone. So I think what I want to do now is focus my time on supporting others in the best way I can, and you know, having that empathy for them in the way that I can help them, and training to be a therapist myself. I've got another 3 years left, but I'm starting my first placement this year. So I feel like I'm going to carry on shouting about Nacoa from the rooftops and doing all I can, but it's going to become less about my story now, because
Yeah.
it takes me back there every time, and that's hard. And
Yeah.
my children need me. They need me to be present, and and it's really hard being a mum when you've been a COA, because you always think you're going to mess them up, and it's this real difficult thing about, I want to be the perfect parent, but I'm going to become my mum and I'm going to traumatize them. It's hard being a mum. So I just feel like I want to be a lot more present now and thinking about the future after this year.
I mean, I think you would make an amazing therapist. Myself, I did 2 years studying counselling, and that's when my mum died, and it just put the spanner in the works. So I wasn't doing my homework and that, but I met some amazing people as well, with real empathy and some real skills. But I can pick up on you that I think you'd be wonderful, and I think it's a really good move that you're gonna start to leave it behind, because that's what I'm doing now. Because I'm not saying I'm bored of my own voice talking about it, but I've done so much more with my self-development now that I feel like I want to enter a new phase. So when I get invited onto podcasts and they say, we want to hear your story, it's like, you can hear about what I'm doing now and what I plan for the future. And sometimes I don't know what I plan for the future as well, you know. I'm in a bit of a limbo at the moment, is I'm not sure where I am. So I'm sitting with that. I'm not pushing it, you know.
Yeah.
But I'm leaving the door open to think, okay, I know what I don't want to do, but I'm not sure what I actually want to do, but that's okay. I'm just in that sort of settling down stage and whatever. But you know, we're doing a couple of things. I'm meeting you next week, so this would be in the past by the time this is heard. But we're meeting. There's a speech in like Parliament. Vicky Patterson's a new patron, isn't she, of Nacoa? Which is great news. And I saw on the telly the other day, and I thought she spoke really eloquently about her new role, because
It's
she
really
was in that doc.
exciting.
Yeah, it's really exciting. I'm going to meet you there, and I don't think you're doing that walk, are you?
No, sorry. I was just going to say to you, anything you think's brewing, but you don't know which direction you're going in,
Yeah.
you'll get it on that walk. I think, when you walk for a long time, this is going to be really good for you, Dave, because you're going to come out of it and go, I know where my life's going. You will, honestly. I
Well,
can't
that's what I
wait to
did
see where
last
it takes
weekend
you.
with that
Yeah.
walk on the South Downs, and you know what that's done? That's cleared away all the cobwebs in my head. I made a point of coming off social media, limiting phone calls, TV, reading. I just sat with myself, right? And what it did, it brought up certain things, right? But it allowed me headspace. And that's really, really important, because in these times that we got the instant gratification of the scrolling, Netflix, there's so much out there, and the busy lives we lead. I actually thought, you know what? I'm not even going to listen to music or podcasts or what I want to. And I came back from that. And I feel like something's happening. But I think being around wonderful people, raising money for charity, and let's face it, the Nacoa need it after the government cut their funding, which is a whole new conversation. I think it's going to be really, really wonderful. And do you know what I'm doing after that? 2 days after that, flying
Something
to
else
Morocco.
crazy. Oh my God.
Yeah,
Wow.
climbing
What's that for?
climbing a mountain in
Is
Morocco.
that for charity?
Well, it isn't exactly. I could, but I want to raise money for Nacoa. So I'm probably just doing that off my own back. There's a few of
Yeah.
us that we got guides, and we're going to sleep up in a mountain. But none of this stuff I'd be doing if I was drinking. None of any of
No.
this. If I'll probably be dead for a start. What a waste of life. But as you, I get a lot of pleasure helping people. That's why I record these podcasts, because there are always people that hook in and they go, oh, I heard Ceri the other day on your podcast and it really resonated with me, and I could understand where she's coming from. And it's so important to do the work we do. But I think it's equally important to set time aside to have self-development, time with the family, like all the things that nurture your life as well.
I just don't get a buzz from social media in the way of supporting people like I used to, like working on the ground with them. I really feel that connection. But when you put stuff out on social media, you don't feel it back in the same way. And I actually found it quite lonely. And once I realised that, what I like social media for now is just being a bit more silly, just a bit of a light connection. But I realised I wasn't getting it in that way. It's kind of done the opposite to me. Instead of pulling me in, it's pulled me out. And I thought,
Yeah.
oh, I need real life connection. I need to feel an energy in a room from people. And
Yeah.
that's why I thought becoming a therapist, I can really do that. I can really connect on a deeper level. But I think it can be really good in other ways for finding your tribe, like the sober community, the COA community. I've got some of my best friends who I'm going to be seeing next week at the House of Commons that I haven't that I can't imagine being without now. You know, any
Mm,
times I am struggling, I connect with them. So it's been amazing. But where I am right now, like you, I've had a bit of a like, oh, there's something really shifting for me.
mm.
I don't want to tell my story on social media anymore or anything like that. I want to, yeah, take it in a different direction. So
Maybe
you'll
it's that
find yours.
physical connection as well, you know, like
Mm,
because we were thrown into this world in lockdown,
yeah.
we discovered Zoom, and it was like, what is Zoom? What the hell? How do we work that right? And then all of a sudden, everything's on Zoom. Our lives
Mm,
on Instagram are on the version of Zoom. You know, like it's all Zoom. There's nothing like meeting someone, looking them in the eyes, giving them a hug, and
yeah.
saying, I'm really proud of you. You know, that physical human connection is so important, especially when it comes to addiction,
Mm.
children of alcoholics, you know, that sitting across a table with someone and having that dialect personally is so powerful.
Yeah, yeah. But I've been working on this actually. I've got a real thing about hugs.
Ah,
My friends would all laugh and say that I don't really like them. And one actually got me a badge once which said "Don't hug me." But I realised the other week I don't mind hugs from men, but I don't really like them from women.
mm,
And I thought, what's that about? But I think it is because I lost trust in mum. And I remember we didn't have any physical connection at all towards the end because I didn't trust her anymore. But I really trusted my granddad and he always kept me safe. So when men hug me, I feel quite safe. But when women do, I don't know, something feels quite I don't know, I don't like it as much. So
that's interesting because your
yeah,
first, like the role model in your life when you were four was really like danger. There was danger
yeah,
there, wasn't he? So
yeah.
that's interesting because you would think might be the other way round.
I know. I thought I was really scared of men, but actually I think because my granddad was so strong and he really kept me safe. Yeah, it's really weird. I've only worked this out in the last few weeks. It's very strange. But I thought I was not a huggy person, but it appears I am with men.
Well, it's weird as well, you know, because when I did my 2 years counselling course, that was part of it. Is like shaking someone's hand, giving them a hug, right? Was all about that. How do you know
Yeah,
that person hasn't been abused, and that is a real intrusion on their boundaries? And I started to think about that after. It's like I automatically give someone a hug if I meet them or shake their hand. And
mm,
actually, when this subject come up, there were at least 4 or 5 in the group that said they don't like that human connection because of stuff from their past. And I think we just take it for granted. It's like, well, I'm being really, really friendly. Come here.
yeah,
Um, it's a really interesting subject, actually.
yeah. Because some people just don't feel that way, do they? Yeah,
No.
I had a little moment in college last week where we had to do a diagram of sort of some of our trauma and what it's caused. And I got a little bit upset at one point. And the woman next to me said, "Would you like a hug?" And I said, "No, thank you." And it was so lovely that she asked me, and I was able to say
Mm,
no. And she was absolutely fine about it. And I thought, oh, yeah, that's really good. That's what I would,
mm,
because I know what you mean. It's like give someone a tissue, give them a hug. But actually, is
mm,
that what they want? Or are you
mm,
trying to kind of shut down what's happening?
mm,
When sometimes people do just need to feel sad and just feel their emotions because it's really hard to feel sometimes like when you've never been able to. My feelings were never allowed when I was young. It was always
mm,
about my mum. I couldn't even cry. I couldn't be anything. I just had to be strong for her. So now if I feel like I'm going to cry, it's actually a real good release. It's a
mm.
good thing, isn't it, crying? It's not a bad shameful thing.
No, it isn't. It's powerful. Before we go, Kerry, have you got any advice for anyone hearing this that they feel, you know, this conversation has been of use or they gone through a similar experience? What would you say to them?
I'd say go on Nacoa's website. It will change your life. The first thing I ever did was read their personal experiences page. Just read
Mm,
what others have been through, and you'll think, oh my God, like everyone you'll relate something to. And
mm,
then check out their message boards, have a look at some of the videos I've made. All my videos are on there. There's some amazing books. Like, just have a little look around. You don't have to do anything, no one has to know, but just have a little explore and see how it makes you feel, and then, you know, call them if you need to. But there's loads of communities around. Just don't be alone anymore, because I'm sure you've been alone for a long time if you're listening to this and connecting.
Oh, that's really powerful. Yeah, community is everything, you know. And that's how I found my tribe in the beginning, because I felt I was just treading water on my own, and drinking was lonely enough for me, and I didn't need that in sobriety. And once I found people like-minded to me and understood, there's a unspoken code of I get you. You know, and I
Mm,
think it's with COAs as well. You just
mhm.
know, you understand what you've been through and whatever. And that's brilliant, Ceri. I'm so grateful that you've taken the time today to join me. I'm
No,
so
it's been a
grateful.
pleasure.
And I'm
I
really
can't wait.
excited about what you've got ahead of you as well, what work you're going to be doing. And are there any more films going to be made?
I don't know. I don't, they just come out of nowhere, the films do. I'll have a thought and then I just don't stop until it's done. So you never know. I don't plan these things, they just happen.
Oh, bless you. Well, thank you, darling, so much for joining me. And I will see you soon.
Thank you, Dave. Okay,
Take it easy. Bye. Bye.
bye.